when you hear players like, let's say, Ricardo Modric going to Chelsea for 90 million, Matoma at Brighton for, how much did you guys see?
A lot less than that.
Okay, you're not going to tell us the price, yeah.
Like Matoma, he's going to attract interest, so maybe you have to sit down with him. So, like, do you almost fear being too successful because that comes with its problems?
Yeah.
It's a good point. You're right in some way.
皆さんこんにちは。いつもたくさんご視聴いただきありがとうございます。そして今回も250ライクでトッテナム対ブライトンのプレビュー動画をアップロードします。その動画では三笘選手が、現地のサポーターから評価を受ける動画であったり、あとはデゼルビ監督や、他のブライトンの選手の前日記者会見を日本語に訳してアップロードしますので、たくさんの高評価をよろしくお願いいたします。今回の動画に関してなんですけど、ブライトンの CEO が三笘選手について語る動画になります。こちらはパート2の動画になりますので、まだパート1の動画を見ていない方は、そちらを見ることをお勧めします。そして今回の動画を流す前に、まずはそのスコア予想ランキングを見ていきたいと思います。こちらが更新されたスコア予想ランキングになりますが、まだまだ6月までには本当にたくさんの試合が残っていますので、今から新しくこのゲームに参加する人でも遅くはないと思います。サムネにプレビューって書いてあって、その試合のスコア予想を当てるゲームとなります。なので、プレビューってサムネに書いてある動画だけにスコア予想を当ててみてください。今後もたくさんの試合がありますので、多くの方にこのゲームに参加してもらいたいと思います。6月には1位になった方でユニフォームをプレゼントしますし、4点差以上のスコア予想を当てた方には2ポイントとしてこのスコア予想ランキングにカウントしますので、まだまだ本当に誰にでもチャンスがあると思います。そしてこの1ヶ月間の間、4月15日までにチャンネル登録してくれた方1名にスポーツフリークのオリジナル T シャツまたはレアルソシエダードの T シャツをプレゼントしますので、たくさんの登録をよろしくお願いいたします。そして、スポーツフリークの T シャツに関してですが、今着ているものになりますが、サッカー選手がボールを蹴っていて、後ろにスポーツフリーク、横にはジョニー・デイ・イラン、スキップ・定期、スパロー・イランという文字が書いてあります。もちろんこの T シャツに関しては、スポーツフリークのオリジナルネットショップにも売られているので、そのコメント欄の下に売られている商品が並んでありますので、少しだけでも興味ある方はそこをクリックしていただければと思います。では今回のパート2の動画を、流しますが、まだパート1の動画を見てない方は、まずはパート1の動画を見ていただいて、その後、こちらのパート2を見ることをお勧めします。では、今回訳した動画はこちらになります。
And I think I just want to narrow down on recruitment a little bit more because for me, Oxlade, he's a testament in terms of Matoma. He's the player I want to watch most in the Premier League right now. And when you hear players like, let's say, Ricardo Modric going to Chelsea for 90 million, and you see Matoma at Brighton for, how much did you guys see?
A lot less than that.
Okay, you're not going to tell us the price, yeah.
Like, what is the strategy? Obviously, you
can't give the
your
answers.
secrets, of course.
Sure.
But how do you identify talent?
First of all, we have to fish in different ponds to the biggest clubs in the country because, first of all, we can't afford to fish in the ponds that they're fishing in. And very often, the biggest fish in those ponds are going to be the sort of players that will want to go to Champions League level clubs immediately. And we're also prepared to take a risk perhaps on younger players that the bigger clubs don't need to take a risk on because they can afford to buy the more established players. And then once those younger players are here, we have a number of different pathways for them. If they're good enough, like Buonanotte, they can come straight in at 18 years of age to our first team squad. And now he's been rewarded with a call up to the full Argentinian team at 18, which is incredible. Or we can move them on loan to a club elsewhere in Europe so they get a bit of time out of the spotlight of the Premier League, out of the pressures of the Premier League to develop a bit further living in Europe, or we can loan them to a club at a lower level in England so they get used to the country and the language, but they're not again in the spotlight of the Premier League. And then when they're ready, the idea then is to bring them back into our first team squad at a time when perhaps we're about to sell one of the more established players. So in the case of Moises Caicedo, who was on loan in Belgium, there was increasing speculations about Bissouma moving on. We bring Moises back. Tottenham come in for Eves. Eves goes out, and Moises is ready to play. And that's how we try and manage our recruitment.
Do you almost fear being too successful. So, for example, in your instance, you may have to fast track contract situations. For example, the Zerbi, maybe in the summer, you might have to sit down with him. Matoma, he's going to attract interest, so maybe you have to sit down with him. So, like, do you almost fear being too successful because that comes with its problems?
Yeah, it's a good point. You're right in some ways. Is that the more success you have, the more vulnerable you become. It's a sort of a strange situation. But I think, as I said earlier, I think a club like ours that has been around for 122 years, but has mainly played in the bottom two divisions of the pyramid. We're on a journey, and this is part of that journey. We've got to wise up, and we've got to toughen up to that situation. And I think we're realistic about what can happen, but we're also quite prepared to stand our ground when we need to. If we've got a player on a good contract, or if we've got someone that we think actually it's not right for them to leave at this moment, we can say no. And we're lucky in the sense that we're not a club that, from a financial point of view, has to sell players to survive. We're very fortunate in that respect. And I think that puts us in a really good position when it comes to negotiations. And I think the other point I would say is that we're very honest with players. We'll say to them, look, we think you should be here for another year or another 6 months or another 18 months. And at that point, if the right move materializes, we'll help you achieve it. And the players trust us to keep to our word. And that helps us as well, because going out when you're recruiting is very rare that you're recruiting a player where you're the only club interested. Very often there can be 2 or 3 or 4 or more clubs interested. If you've got the reputation for bringing a player in, giving him a pathway to the first team, then when opportunities come in the future that enable that player to progress, the player's more likely to choose your club than another. And so, again, it's a balancing act, because you don't want people to think you're just some kind of stepping stone.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, that's our edge when it comes to recruiting players, that we do have a pathway to our first team. If you're Manchester City, there are lots and lots of players in that sort of process that could block your pathway to the first team. So therefore, you have to be an exceptional player to make Pep's 11 or Jurgen's 11 at Liverpool. These are exceptionally big clubs with incredible squads and great talent all the way through.
今回の動画はいかがでしたでしょうか。まだパート1の動画を見てない方はパート1を見ることをお勧めします。そしてまた250ライクでトッテナム対ブライトンのプレビュー動画もアップロードしますので、たくさんの高評価をよろしくお願いいたします。こちらが今後のブライトンの日程になるんですけれども、次節が4月の8日にトッテナムとの試合を控えていて、日本時間で23時にこの試合は行われます。その次の週には、15日にチェルシーとの試合があって、これも同じく23時の試合となります。そして24日には FA カップの準決勝、マンチェスターユナイテッド相手に、ウェンブリースタジアムで試合が行われます。そして、その3日後にはなんとノッティンガム・フォレストのアウェイの試合があって、またその2日後にはウルブズの試合を控えています。こちらが今現在のプレミアリーグのランキングになりますが、ブライトンは今現在6位でありますが、トッテナムとの試合がその直接対決になると思いますが、それをものにすれば、トップ4に入れる可能性が高まると思いますが、皆さんは、今シーズンブライトンは何位で終わることはできると思いますか？コメント欄に意見を教えていただければと思います。では今回の動画はここまでになりますが、いつも通りチャンネル登録と高評価をよろしくお願いいたします。毎日のように新しいコンテンツをアップロードしていますので、通知オンにしていただければその新しいコンテンツを見逃すことはないです。